Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. You might be thinking of league starting Replica Badge of the Brotherhood, and if you are, I wanted to make a little bit of a case that you probably shouldn't. That's not because this item is bad. This item is going to be much better in patch 3.26 than it was in patch 3.25. There's simply more synergies available with it. However, there is a very real problem here, and that is this item has been fairly cheap. Not because it's common, it's actually very, very rare, but because not all that many people wanted it. If we have a look at its price trajectory during patch 3.25, you'll see that early on it never really cracked through 200 chaos, except very, very late in the league. It's the sort of thing that you could afford if you're a more casual player, you save up a bunch of currency over time, and maybe you can't afford it on days 1, 2, and 3, but by the time you hit day 7, you probably do have 200 chaos if you're at endgame. Well, there is a very good reason that's not going to be the case. That is that there are a huge series of buffs that are taking place to the Champion Ascendancy. Let's have a quick look at the ones that matter here. The Fortitude Ascendancy passive skill now causes you to always have your maximum fortification. Previously, you always had 15 fortification, and also grants you a little bit of an extra bonus on top of that. The Unstoppable Hero Ascendancy passive skill no longer causes nearby allies to have fortification equal to yours. That's now been rolled into Fortitude, and now instead provides you with bonuses for raising your fortification above 20 and keeping it there. So you get 3% more armor and evasion rating per fort over 20, and also 3% increased attack speed per fort over 20. Both of these are really good, especially because you're probably using this in conjunction with the unique belt Perseverance, and that is something that definitely rewards you for having a high armor and evasion rating. That's not all the buffs the Champion Ascendancy is getting, but they're the relevant ones here. So, because of these buffs, the Champion Ascendancy has been hyped a lot, and people have immediately thought, I want to use Replica Badge of the Brotherhood, because it has so much synergy with this. Let's have a look at those synergies, shall we? Your maximum endurance charges are equal to your maximum frenzy charges. What this means is that each source of +1 maximum frenzy charge that you can get also gives you +1 maximum endurance charge. +1 to maximum fortification per endurance charge. Now that on its own is useful, but when it's combined with also granting you an additional 3% more armor and evasion rating and an additional 3% increased attack speed, suddenly becomes a lot better. There's a bunch of other text on Replica Badge of the Brotherhood, but it's not quite as important. The key thing here is that this is probably going to be the best in slot amulet for a lot of different champion builds, and that's going to mean that a lot of very wealthy players are going to want to source it. So how rare is this item? Well, it's actually the same rarity we believe as Replica Elberon's Warpath. How expensive was Replica Elberon's Warpath in Settlers League, where it was actually right at the centerpiece of the meta? Well, it started out trading for thousands of chaos, raised up to the low 10,000s of chaos, and then it fell down a little bit. If you prefer to think of things in terms of the Divine Orb, it was around 40 at the time that I got mine, and then it did raise higher than that. I sold mine very early on, and then after that, I think it ended up being in the 60s at one point, and then it started to fall down. But even when it fell down, it always stayed double digits against the Divine Orb. So, Replica Badge of the Brotherhood, if it is as popular in Next League as Replica Elberon's Warpath was, then you can expect it to be a very expensive, very tough to get chase item. I don't want this video to dissuade you from playing a champion as a league starter. I think it's very, very viable to play a champion as a league starter all the way through. But I do want you to think, Replica Badge of the Brotherhood, I might not have that for a while. What am I going to do instead? I will point out that the same argument doesn't really apply to the Celestial Brace. The Celestial Brace is going to be fantastic on a lot of champion builds. Not necessarily your champion build, but definitely a lot of them. And it's going to see a lot of widespread play as a result. Because this drops from the Uber Searing Exarch, it can seem like, oh, this could be a real chase item. But there's one very important thing. This item is relatively common from the Uber Searing Exarch. Has a drop rate something in the order of 1 in 4 runs. And whilst there's a lot of variation between one that has an explicit modifier roll of +1 maximum fort and +10 maximum fort, if it does turn out that this item is really expensive next league, you can just directly apply Divine Orbs until this roll becomes an 8, 9, or a 10. On average, that's going to take you 3 1/3 Divine Orbs, and then you've got something that is definitely serviceable, definitely worth your while using, and that you can then later replace it with a 10 when you're able to afford that comfortably. So Celestial Brace doesn't have the same issues that Replica Badge of the Brotherhood does. But please, please, please do not count upon getting Replica Badge of the Brotherhood in week 1, unless you know that you're the sort of player that has the experience with Path of Exile's Trade League economy in order to definitely guarantee that you'll get that, even if your league starter isn't at full power at the time. And finally, if you're a heist enjoyer, congratulations, you've just got yourself an extra jackpot drop that you could potentially get anytime that you run into a heist in the Rogue Harbour. May your Val Orbs have interesting results.